This is the World Organic News, the week ending 10th of December 2018. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. We've moved and are now in sunny northwest Tasmania. We've only been in a week, so I haven't had time to set up the studio as I would like it. So if this is a bit echoey or loud in places, I do apologise. This week I came smack bang up against an attitude I find rubs me the wrong way. I was asked if we were hobby farmers. Hobby. I thought to myself, now I know people with 1,000 acres who run it as a hobby. The fact that we are on less than 2 does not mean that we are just pretending or faffing about. Now, having got that off my chest, to this week's posts. And we begin with an upliftingly entitled piece from Grist, The Future of Food, Droughts, Wrecked Crops and Empty Plates. Quote, more droughts, more punishingly hot days, killing farm workers and livestock, more allergen-spewing weeds, more crop-wrecking storms, and ultimately more hunger. According to the recently reduced National Climate Assessment, global warming is already making farming in the United States more difficult. And it's likely to get worse. A steep decline in US harvest could spur a worldwide crisis because grains, oils and meats from the US ship to every continent. It would increase pressure to clear rainforests around the equator and the arboreal forests of Canada and Russia to grow food. Falling yields would also drive up food prices. End quote. Now I know that's not a pleasant way to start this episode, but it is the harsh reality. I do get a bit sick of people defending climate change through the appeal to the 97% of scientists argument. Relying on the data rather than the reputation of the individuals is what science is about, not consensus. So things are crook and getting worse. This particular post is only about the US and the effects climate change is and will have on that agricultural sector. The pressure to clear rainforests around the equator and the arboreal forests of Canada and Russia to grow food part of the quote is concerning. This would only reinforce the current trend of removing more carbon from the landscape and placing it in the atmosphere, a self-perpetuating cycle of increasingly disastrous outcomes. But, on an up note, and from the post, quote, radical adaptation could improve harvests and help solve the larger climate problems. Crops can suck carbon dioxide out of the air and store it in the soil. The report notes that agriculture is one of the few sectors with the potential for significant increases in carbon sequestration, end quote. Or as someone else once said, decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. But I digress. The next post, Global Warming Underlies India's Giant Agrarian Crisis, from the blog People and Nature, highlights the tenuous existence of many on this planet. This is a bare bones description of farming on the very edge. The author of the piece, Nagraj Adavi, he's talking about a trip he made into an agricultural regions of India and the problems the locals were experiencing. I apologise for any butchered pronunciations coming up, but this quote refers to an area in Gujarat. Quote, winters have been getting less cold for about 7 or 8 years, a group of farmers told us at Jur Umaria, Panchamal district. Our wheat production has halved. The dew does not fall anymore. Village after village in Panchmahal, being unable to afford wells and with poorly developed water markets in this predominantly Adivasi belt, most marginal farmers face sharply reduced yields thanks to lesser dew. Many were forced to leave their land fallow, end quote. Can you imagine farming where the water supply was so low, dew was a critical part of the production cycle? I found this short quote alone quite gut-wrenching. And a further quote from the post. Rising temperatures have also been impacting agriculture in faraway Sikkim, but differently. Across the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, the average temperature has risen by 1.24 degrees C between 1951 and 2014. About twice as much as India's average rise over the same time. Together with a steep rainfall decline in the northeast, 15% below normal over the last 20 years, and prolonged dry spells, This has left many mountain springs with lower discharge if they haven't dried up entirely. As a result, the productivity of crops has drastically declined. Gahanashaham Sharma, head the Mountain Institute India, Gangtok, said, in Pendam, East Sikkim district, many farmers now cannot cultivate wet rice due to water scarcity. Its impacts are unequal. Small and marginalised farmers are particularly vulnerable owing to their high dependence on agriculture for their livelihoods and chronic food insecurity. End quote. But when what will soon be the most populous nation on earth is starting to feel food production constraints from climate change, then we can expect social unrest, violence and chaos as a food crisis, the one referred to in the Grist article above, begins to spread across the planet. The food riots of 2007-8 will begin to pale into insignificance if we don't get this fixed. As the Grist article stated, we can sequester carbon through agriculture, but when individuals are dropping a crop from their annual rotation because there is insufficient dew, then we're all in for a rough time ahead. Mrs. World Organic News and myself have been in a position to move to a more temperate climate ahead of the rising temperatures. We are not alone, but we are, by world standards, extremely affluent. The dew-reliant farmers of Panch Mahal and the Sikkim farmers with drying wells do not have that luxury, and I use that word intentionally. The positive I can find in this is as follows. We can improve the lives of people we will never meet. We can help them to feed themselves and others just by improving the soil where we stand. We just need sufficient of us around the world to do so, and we can suck carbon dioxide out of the air and place it in the soil. This simple act will not only assist fellow agriculturalists around the world, it will improve the quality and quantity of our own produce. It is the ultimate win-win. And on that call to action, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. So with all of the above in mind and the fact that we live in the 21st century, I'm opening up applications for a regenerative agriculture mastermind group. It'll be limited to 12 people. We'll meet weekly to discuss successes, challenges and decisions we'll be making. The wisdom of the crowd applied to this necessary field of endeavour. You can have a look at the intro page and click through to the application at worldorganicnews.com/mastermind application. There's also a link in the show notes. And of course, the podcasting checklist is still available over at mrjohnmoore.com. A transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.